This is Pop Culture Confidential, and I'm Christina Yerling Biru. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. It's such an honor to be joined by Oscar-nominated costume designer Malgosia Turzanska, recognized for her extraordinary work on Chloé Zhao's Hamnet, and who also worked on this year's Train Dreams, as well as past projects like Stranger Things, The Green Knight, X, and Pearl. Our conversation dives deep into the fascinating journey behind Hamnet, from researching Elizabethan clothing and exploring the Shakespeare family to the idea of emotional dressing. We talk about how Agnes Shakespeare, in an Oscar-nominated performance by Jessie Buckley, is framed in bold reds. How Shakespeare's mother, played by Emily Watson, carries extra padding as a metaphorical shield against the violence from her husband. The ink-stained fingers of Will Shakespeare himself, and the most difficult piece for Malgosia to design, Will, played by Paul Mescal's final costume on stage, which was also one of the most emotional scenes for me. And yes, we even get into what she's wearing to the Oscars. Congratulations on your nominations and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I just want to start by saying that a while back I was at an awards event and this vision walks into the room in this beautiful red hair and an incredible dress with these, I don't know what they're called, the side hip table wide hoops. It was so awesome. And it was you, and everyone in the room just looked and said, "Oh my God." And I think that you had made that dress. Is that true? Do you remember what I'm referring to?
I think you're talking about my shower curtain dress, actually, the one with the Bosch,
Yes.
the the Bosch painting. Yes, I did make that dress out of a $60 shower curtain.
It was amazing. So that was the first glimpse I got of you in person. But I want to start with your research process on Chloé Zhao's Hamnet, which is quite incredible. When this film came to you and you started thinking of these families, specifically of the Shakespeare family, kind of the working class in Elizabethan times, where did you get your information and inspiration?
Truly from everywhere. I love the research process. This is my favorite moment because you just don't know what you're going to find. So I read historical records, I go to museums, I go into like rabbit holes on Google, obviously historical costume sources, so just everywhere, including a lot of paintings. And so here the interesting thing is that when we think of the Tudor Elizabethan period, very often we think of very kind of stiff, poised portraits, um, which weren't helpful here very much since this is not royalty, this is not nobles. So I looked at a lot of slightly earlier or paintings that were not necessarily from England, but kind of from all over Europe. Sebastian Frank was a painter that I did not know before, and he was super helpful to me in this because in his paintings there was a lot of movement. They were very dynamic, and there were lower classes portrayed in the images, and you could see how the garments are put together. There were like shirts that were billowing up. You could see the underwear showing, socks that were falling down. So it was very, very kind of a good study for a costume designer. So I looked at him, I looked at Bruegel, I looked at multiple painters that everything I could get my hands on. And I just had a folder on my computer that was called Interesting Characters, that every time I saw a little figure on the painting that had something interesting to them, I would put it in that folder. And once we were dressing our background actors, I had a ready-made examples for our background dressers also, that to kind of look at these people, see how they feel, how they're put together. So art was incredibly helpful. But research wise, there were so many incredible shapes and elements of fashion that I was not aware before. And so with the Shakespeare household, there were several kind of threads that we were following. One was the emotional side, where, very honestly, I was kind of mad at Mary, the mother of Will. I was angry that she was not defending her children more. She was not standing up to this violent husband. And then I thought, well, obviously she loves her family. So if she is not vocally or physically defending them, what does she do to protect them? And so I thought she would be adding cushioning to their garments. So in case if they, there was a blow coming from the
Oh,
father,
like a protective garment.
so it's both on her. She's wearing a bodice that has padding, kind of like quilted padding, almost like a sports I looked at vintage sports protective garments, and all of the kids have a little bit of cushioning in the costumes, including Will. So the first time we see him, he is wearing this quilted doublet, quilted in a kind of irregular linear pattern. And also another part of it was color. Again, the same way she would be providing clothing for her children that is um, lets them camouflage themselves a little bit and not provoke the father. So they're mostly in grayscale that they can kind of blend into the, like before I started the period, just like an emotional moment of like, what do I think this woman would have provided the kids with? And obviously Will stands out a little bit from it. When we see him first, he is more greenish bluish rather than just on the grayscale, but the grayscale is then very present in him throughout the rest of his story. But that was the beginning. And then in terms of the items that I found that again enriched the design for me, was one of the things was a toothpick. It turned out that a lot of the people in the period would wear toothpicks kind of as jewelry on their on a necklace. And so I found one that we built our own, but we based it on one that I found that was kind of a very violent claw-like shape, and it was encrusted with little jewels, but it looks like a little almost like a shark tooth on his neck. And I imagined he would take that and like poke at Will. And so because we see him like hurting him constantly with those little jabs.
But the toothpicks, people actually had them to use them.
Yeah,
So there was a
exactly.
practical element. Because that's so interesting with
Yeah.
clothing, because there's so much, I mean, clothing is fashion, but there's also so much a practical element, right? What
I
you sleep in and what did you learn about how they used their clothes?
So this was the super cool thing was the modularity of the clothing. So you could either use pins or you could use hooks and bars or ties to connect for example, sleeves to a doublet. So you could switch out the sleeves or wear it without the sleeves. So there was you could from one garment you could suddenly have a number of different garments, and we're definitely using that both actually with Agnes and
I
especially with
want that.
it just like it it opens up your closet to many more variations, which is really fantastic.
But was
uh,
that for like to change for fashion or for like cleaning? Or I mean, was
Both.
there
So the practical side of it was that, you didn't have to wash, like you wore a smock underneath. Everyone started with a smock. So men wore kind of like a smock that would go to the knees, and women's would fall down to the ankles. And that was the first layer you would put on. And then on top of that, you would put on, the other layers. So like breeches for men. There was no underwear really, so you kind of tied your shirt like between your legs a little bit to provide protection and yeah, to kind of like provide protection but before you put the pants on. And then there you had jerkins, you had doublets. But because that first layer, the linen, the undershirt, essentially the smock, that would be the garment that you would wash or change.
hmm
And linen has like antibacterial, it's not, yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was a great fabric for that. And everything that came on top you wouldn't wash really, or like maybe you would clean it or brush it, but you wouldn't really wash like leather, a leather doublet. But the sleeves you could attach to it could be made out of anything. But again, it's something that you would clean rather than launder. But the first layer was the one that would actually be laundered. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And in terms of Will Shakespeare, the fact that he's a writer, artist, did you incorporate that into your thinking?
So there was the one thing we kept from the images that we know of Shakespeare, which, only one is possibly made during his lifetime. The rest are just interpretations. So we did keep his little earring, and so that kind of gives him a little bit of an artist flair. But I found this item called a penner, which is these little two tubes. One holds a little bottle of ink, and one holds a quill, and it kind of is slung across the belt. So he always had his writing tools with him, and he loved that. And he even though normally men would have worn a dagger also on the belt, Paul didn't want to do that. He was just like, this is enough, this is all I need, as a
His
writer.
weapon is the art, of course. Yeah.
He always had his fingers stained with ink. We worked with Nicole Stafford, our brilliant hair and makeup designer, and we actually got the ink that Shakespeare used. Shakespeare made his own, but we bought it. It's called Iron Oakle ink, and it is this incredible dark gray concoction that is made of these growths on oak trees that are then mixed. There's like a liquid in it. You mix it with rusty metal, rusty nails, and it and actually Will's the grayscale of his colors comes from that. We like diluted it and kind of grabbed color from it, but it stained his clothes, it stained his fingers. So that was very, very present. His writing was like very present. But there is a moment where we see during Hamnet's death, we see Hamnet's fingers that are black from his disease, um and it connects to those inky fingers, this it just like
Yeah.
somehow they connect through the black void.
And there's another thing that made me cry reading about the research because I didn't realize that Paul, when he plays the ghost in the Hamlet production, that he's actually wearing the burial sheet.
That's exactly it. And
Yeah.
again, it's that, but it connects to the moment when we see Hamnet coming down the stairs for the last time before he gets into the bed. He is, he's just covered in a bed sheet, so it mirrors that moment too. But yeah, it is a burial sheet, yeah.
Very strong how you connect the different ones. I have to, of course, ask about Agnes because you were talking earlier about how you work so emotionally or you look
Yeah.
through emotions, and her with all the red. I'm supposing that's as opposed to the mother of Will, that this is
Yeah.
another emotion you're bringing through. Tell me about that.
That's exactly it. And this was about like life, about blood flow and this vitality. And when Will sees her for the first time and she's on the background of the forest, he just cannot turn away. He cannot unsee her. She's just so vibrant and so alive, and he's never seen anyone like that. And so, we capture her in that initial moment with those vibrant reds and oranges, and then we watch her travel through the rest of the movie with the colors changing slightly. And it was, very much about the flowing blood. And then the blood kind of slows down as she becomes the mother. It becomes more rusty, a little just like calmer and slower. And then when Hamnet dies, it dries up. So she becomes this like gray purple scab. And then when we return to the globe, or when we go to the globe, she is actually wearing one of the dresses that she wore when she was pregnant with the twins, when she is this giant red egg. But this time she's just wearing the dress closed up, but we
Right.
see the blood flow kind of starting to return to her veins.
And I also think it's wonderful with the children, particularly the scene with the little theater they do for their mom in the garden.
So that was a super, super fun moment. So a lot of the movie, Chloe would add additional ideas throughout. She would leave us these little voice memos as she was driving to the studio in the morning, and she was like, "So guys, I was thinking," and there was like a whole new branch growing out of the what we've already been talking about. And this was one of those moments. It did not exist. It had like just a few hours to put that together. Jessie did not know this was happening, so it is a pure surprise for her. So when she opens up her eyes, this is the first time she is seeing what is happening, which was so fun. And what what it meant that, we didn't have really that much time to prepare. It meant that I was running around just as the kids would. I was running around our department and the department, putting things on my head and being like, can this work? Can this work? And so it was so like vibrant and alive because of that, because it was real. And so it was, a basket from the art department that had a hole for the face. We had some woven straw fabric that was on Jacoby's head, and then some, plants and sticks, and a lambskin. So it was just things that were lying around there, that would have been around their house, and they were around our studio, because we were truly kind of building this world together.
Was there anything particular in that era that how children would be dressed?
So it is the same modular layers that we talked about. And so they're little jerkins. One is striped horizontally, one is striped vertically for the twins. And you can take the sleeves on and off, and we see it. We see it throughout the movie. Sometimes they just have their little shirts underneath, and sometimes they have additional sleeves. But so it's like little, you could add an apron, there was an underskirt, there was just, you would add volume or layers on top of those the basic building blocks. And what I wanted to make sure of is that these kids, because of Agnes, they're not stiff in any way. They're not like uh, put in any sort of structure. They're very free. So the fabrics are quite soft. They move easily. They can run around. There's, when we see them sitting from the back, you can see like the shirt coming out over the pants. They're not like buttoned up, as opposed to the kids that we see in the Agnes or Agnes's brother's household, the stepmother's children, and they're very proper, and they have multiple layers that they're like very buttoned up and braided, and so this was the contrast.
And going back to the globe scenes, how much do we know about how the actors were sort of dressed at that time,
Yeah.
and was there a lot of costuming going on, and when Shakespeare would put on a play?
So this was one of the places we took a lot of poetic license, like liberties throughout the movie, but this was, I think, the one that was like maybe the biggest difference. Um in the actual period, the players on the stage at that point would look very much like the audience members, because they would use costumes that were donated by the rich benefactors. So the people in the audience, especially the ones in the balconies, who are from the higher social strata, would see themselves in the actors portraying characters on the stage. Um, I didn't want to do that, because I feel like for us as a modern audience, seeing on the screen, seeing people, in Elizabethan costumes here and in Elizabethan costumes here on the stage, it doesn't create any tension, doesn't create any interest. It just didn't work. And so I wanted to create something that is between them and between us, and between then and now, kind of suspended in between. And so I kept the Elizabethan shapes, but we built them out of raw linen, and we painted them with latex paint. So absolutely nothing to do with
Mm.
the period. But what I wanted to do is create something that, if you saw it in a theater in Europe or in Brooklyn right now, you would understand what it is. You would not question it. It would just look fine. It would look normal. So it was that. But in addition to it, because you see the brush strokes, and you see the unfinished nature of those of the painterly texture, I wanted to emphasize the fact that this is a play that has never been done before. Right now, Hamlet has been played billions of times. This is the first time, so it's not yet finished. It's being thought up. Like we're witnessing the process of its creation. And then one more layer on top of this, I was thinking about Will kind of remembering Hamnet and trying to capture Hamnet's essence in a very, very simple manner. And so we have the colors that Hamnet used to wear painted on Hamlet's costume, including his painted hair. So
Yeah,
it
the
is,
white,
yeah,
his
like a
memory
yellow.
of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it is like a super simple memory. Um, and Nicole Stafford, again, our hair and makeup designer, she came up with the hair, and I was just so happy with that because it just like captured that the essence of the memory.
What would you say was the most challenging part for you and your department?
I think for me personally, it was to not get swayed by the excitement of the period because there's so many cool things. There's, the roughs and all the shapes and all. But I wanted to make sure that we distill it to what is essential and necessary for the story, that we simplify it. So it's not standing in the way and it's letting the clear message ring true, and that we're not getting lost, that I'm not putting anything that is not necessary onto the actors.
So
And then
killing darlings and taking things off and scaling
exactly,
back. Yeah, that's hard when when you have an exciting
especially
period.
but it looks so cool,
Yeah.
So, um, but also the actual costume that I was the most afraid of, very honestly, was the final costume of Will, the clay costume. I knew that if it didn't ring true, it would be a disaster. It's just such an important moment, and it has to be so simple and yet so straight to the point. And I went through various iterations of that and finally landed on this, and I believe it works, but
Mhm.
I was so scared, and it was the very, very last costume I designed in the movie. So when it happened, I was like, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and it does.
No, I just want to say that my whole team was truly absolutely astonishing, and the support I got was extraordinary. So from, the makers of the actual menswear and women's wear, through the leather workers, the agers and dyers, the milliners, and the background fitters, where, like, we all work together super closely, and I couldn't have done it without them. So this is not just me.
I had the pleasure a couple weeks ago talking to Fiona, of course,
Oh,
team that you worked so much with, and I asked her kind of what it's like after you put all this research and work and everything, and the actors walk into that set, and what does it feel like for you, the artist, and she had a very beautifully talked about the fact that Jessie didn't want to leave, so she
yeah.
took little naps on the bed and things like that. So I want to ask the same question to you, and when they step into these artworks that you've made and actually just become what does that feel like?
I'll just go back to the set design and production design moment, because yesterday at the nominees luncheon met Miles Catton, whose first movie was Sinners, and he talked about how nervous he was as a first-time actor. Like, would he be able to do it? He was terrified. And then he said, I walked onto the set and I was like, oh, this is
I'm
where I live.
here.
This is the world. And it just opened him up. So it's so beautiful that this collaboration, we don't talk about it so much, and it truly, truly is a beautiful thing. And with the costumes, it was, Jessie came to us straight from Maggie Gyllenhaal's Bride. And so she was bleached blonde, black nailed, like gigantic energy of this movie still in her. And so we were both trying to figure out the shape of Agnes, and kind of to like formulate this, to build this new person. And so I never feel like it's, oh, an actor is stepping into my costume. I feel like it's something that we build together step by step, especially a character like Agnes, who is, such a creature, basically. It's not clothes. It's just
It's
all these,
everything. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Finally, I just
Right.
have to ask you, what are you wearing for the Oscars?
I designed a dress, and we're making it in New York. John Christensen in New York is helping my dream come true. So we will see we will see what will happen.
I can't wait. That's so amazing. I'm so thrilled to have gotten to talk to you. I thank you very much for taking your time. This was amazing. Thank you.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much to Malgosia Turzanska. Wishing you the best of luck at the Oscars, and everyone out there, please go see Hamnet and Train Dreams. Thank you so much for listening. You can find Pop Culture Confidential wherever you get your podcasts. Please like and subscribe, and follow me and get in touch on Insta or X at Christina Biro. See you next time.